Hello learners, and welcome to today's lesson on functions and relationships. Let's start off our lesson with a did you know? Did you know that the rate of speed, that is the distance in relation to time, has a functional relationship? The distance covered is compared to the amount of time taken. The time taken to travel is the input and the distance covered is the output. The results in the rate of speed. That's an interesting fact for our lesson today. So let's go over to our lesson objectives for today. By the end of this lesson, you must be able to identify the input values, the output values, and the rules for any functional relationship using flow diagrams, tables, and formulas or equations. You must also be able to write ordered pairs of a function and represent them on a Cartesian plane. So let's look at the concept map for our lesson today. So our focus being functions and relationships, we are going to be looking at 3 points. That is from verbal representation to a flow diagram. Then we are going to be looking at from a table representation or presentation to formulas. And then lastly, we are going to be looking at from equations to representations on a Cartesian plane. Let's look at the pre-knowledge that you must know for this lesson. So you must know how to investigate and extend numerical patterns, and you must also know how to find the general rule for a given numerical pattern. Let's do some practice and see if we have that pre-knowledge. Study the pattern and find the next 3 terms. So we've been given a pattern here that is 2, 5, and 8. And we are required to find the next 3 terms. So what do you think the next 3 terms are going to be? Obviously, you have to look how we move from the first term to the second term and to the third term. Do you have it already? If you are thinking that the next terms are 11 and 14 and 17, then you are absolutely correct. Of course, that pattern can continue, but we've only been asked for the next 3 terms. Now, how did we get the next 3 terms, or how did we move from one term to another term? From the 2 to the 5, we can see that we are adding 3. And then from the 5 to the 8, we can see that we are also adding 3. So that's how we got the next 3 terms, because from the 8 to the 11, we add 3, and then we keep on adding 3 as our pattern moves along. So let's move on to now finding the formula for this pattern. So here it says there, it says use the same numeric pattern to fill out the table. So I already have the first 3 terms filled out there. So that is the 2, the 5, and the 8. But how did we get to those values? Remember, we were adding 3 every time to get to the next value. So that's where this 3 comes from. We multiply that 3 with our term number or our position, and then we subtract 1, and that's how we got to the 2. Remember, this is pre-knowledge. It means that you have already learned how to do this. So when we move on to the second one, we took the same 3, multiplied it by the term number, and subtracted 1. That gave us the 5. And the same thing was with the third term. We multiplied it by 3, and then subtracted 1, and that gave us the 8. So what happens with the 6th term? We are going to follow the same pattern. We are going to take the 3 multiplied with the term number, and then we are going to subtract 1. So there is 3 multiplied by 6. That gives us 18. And when we subtract 1, we are given 17, which is the 6th term. What about the 10th term? We are going to follow the same rule. We are going to multiply our 10 with the 3, and we are going to subtract 1. What does that give us? So 3 multiplied by 10 is 30, and when we subtract 1, we are given 29. So what happens with the nth term? And remember, the nth term is a general term, meaning it would work for any number. So again, we would take our n, multiply it by 3, and subtract 1, and that would give us now the rule that we have here. So that means that for any term here, it means we would take 3, multiply it by the term number, and then subtract 1, and that is our rule for this pattern. Let's look at another pattern where we are required again to find the next 3 terms. So we have 6, 4, and 2, and that pattern continues. So can you get the next 3 terms from that? Yes, you can see that from 6 to 4, what is happening there? We are subtracting 2. And what is happening from the 4 to the 2? What is happening there? Again, we are subtracting 2. So for us to get the next 3 terms, we need to continue subtracting this 2. So what is 2? Subtract 2, that will give us a 0. If we continue subtracting 2, so that is 0 minus 2, that is going to give us a negative 2. And when we continue subtracting 2 again, that is going to give us a negative 4. And those are the next 3 terms. So now let's use that pattern to fill out this table. So again, we have the first 3 terms in the table, that is our 6, our 4, and our 2. But how did we get to those terms? So firstly, we are going to take now the term number and we are going to multiply it with that negative 2. Where does the negative 2 come from? So as you have seen, for us to find the next term, we were adding a negative 2. That is the same as subtracting that 2. So we multiply the 1 with our negative 2, we add 8, and that gives us the 6. We go and we do the same thing for the second term. We multiply the negative 2 with the second term or position number, and when we add 8, we are given the 4. And we do the same thing for the third term. So what about the 8th term? So for us to find the 8th term, we are going to continue with this pattern. We are going to take negative 2, multiply it by the 8, and when we add 8, that should give us our answer, and that is a negative 8. That's because negative 2 multiplied by 8 is a negative 16, and then when we add 8 to that, that will give us a negative 8. What about the 15th term? That is going to be a negative 2 multiplied by 15, and when we add 8, what answer are we going to get? If you are having a negative 22 as your answer, then you are absolutely correct. Remember, the same will be for our nth term, and that is for any number that we find. We are going to multiply our n with our negative 2, and we are going to add 8. That means that is going to be our formula for this pattern. That is a negative 2n plus 8. And that's how we find the formula for a pattern. Let's look at the keywords that we are going to be focusing on during the lesson. So we have there an equation or a formula. So an equation would be when 2 expressions are equal to each other. For example, we have x plus y is equals to 8. And that represents a formula or an equation. When we are looking at an ordered pair or a point, this is a pair of variables that make an equation with 2 unknowns true. So for example here, we have x plus y is equals to 8. Now the possible ordered pairs here would be 1 and 7, because if one is 1 and the other one is 7, the answer will be 8 when we add them. Another possible pair is 2 and 6, etc. going on. So these are the pairs that make an equation true. The x-coordinate is the first number in an ordered pair. So for example, if I have an ordered pair of 1 and 7, then the 1 is the x-coordinate because it is the first one that comes up there in our ordered pair. And then the y-coordinate, that is the second number in an ordered pair. So in the pair, that is the 1 and the 7 again, then that means that the 7 would now be the y-coordinate. Why? Because it is the one that comes second in that ordered pair. Let's quickly go to an ad break and then we'll see you just now.